My discipline is like my offensive line. Often that strength does not get as many accolades. It's not usually picked as MVP, but it is truly for me what creates the space for me to run my offense. It creates boundaries. It gives me the ability to execute in the way that I know I need to execute to get to my goals, to be strategic. So it's like my offensive line. I count on it. I need it. And that's the way I describe it often.
Hello and welcome back to Coach. Today I have Leanne and Carolyn, and we're talking about discipline. This is one of the rarest strengths of all. It's in the 5 rarest strengths in the world. I was once told that it is the rarest, number 1, that one can have. And this is one that I get to play along as a passive participant. This strength is not only low on my list, it's low in my mind. I laugh and tell people I don't even think it's in my 34. I think it's off the list. I should have 33. Discipline should be off because of how little of this I relate to. So it's so exciting to me to have 2 guests who share this strength in their top 5, and we get to learn more from the experts. So Carolyn, we're going to start with you. If you could be so kind as to give us your top 5 strengths, and then where are you coming in from and how do you relate to discipline?
Awesome. Well, thanks, Brandon. It's so cool to be here. I love this strength. It's such a fun strength to talk about. Top 5 are learner, relator, individualization, arranger, and discipline. And that'll give you a clue on how
All right, so I'm going to say it one more time, just a little slower for people to catch on. She said learner, relator, individualization, arranger with discipline. Did I get that right, Carolyn?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And you were saying? Keep going.
And
sorry.
I'm coming from Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Santa Fe. All right. So you saw discipline in your strengths. It's number 5. Just give us the quick overview. How do you see this connect to it?
Yeah. It's a good one for me. It really creates order at a chaos. It builds some structure. It helps me see patterns and consistency when others might be going, what? I don't get. I don't see the structure. I don't see the order. So it's one that really helps me keep organized and structured when others may really be struggling.
I love it. Okay, those are going to be big words. Organized, structure, order out of chaos, patterns. A lot to unpack there, Carolyn. Thank you. Leanne, your top 5, please.
Awesome. Okay, so mine are individualization.
Okay.
And achiever.
Mm-hmm.
And then discipline.
Okay.
And then I also have harmony and belief is my number 5.
Okay. So we have what I had hoped for. And so for all of you listeners, just so you know, I don't know their top 5 before I come in. That's something I don't know that our listeners know. We don't do this until we start the show because we actually want to have authentic, we're hearing it for the first time. So what I hope to have happen is that we have some similars and some differences. And in this case, we do for sure some good differences. So Leanne, where are you coming from? And tell us how you relate to your discipline strength.
Yeah. So I'm coming from Texas. I actually I was born in Texas. But I grew up in New Mexico and I'm in Santa Fe, and I was in Albuquerque a couple of weeks ago. So love the 505. It was cool to hear that that's where you're from. So, okay. I'm a sports person, so I use a lot of sports analogies. And so a lot of times when I'm describing how discipline shows up for me, and you got to go with me on this for a minute, is I feel like, because I lead with executing themes, most of my top 10 are in executing. So I'm like, if I'm running an offense, right, my discipline is like my offensive line. Often that strength does not get as many accolades. They're not it's not usually picked as MVP, but it is truly for me what creates the space for me to run my offense. It creates boundaries. It gives me the ability to execute in the way that I know I need to execute to get to my goals, to be strategic. So it's it's my offensive line. I count on it. I need it. And that's the way I describe it often.
Oh my gosh. Leanne, I knew I liked you, but from one offensive lineman
Oh, yeah.
To someone who just brought this up, I am a football coach. I coach O-line. I played O-line. I still look like a lineman sometimes to my own regret. Um, I love that understanding of this. It's the one that clears space, helps you to run the offense, but doesn't get a lot of credit. And we have to talk about the
Yeah.
unsung hero that is disciplined.
Right.
Because sometimes people see that discipline and they're like, ooh, what do you do with that one? And either they're like inspired or terrified. I find one of those responses is how people typically they see discipline and they're like, when I heard the word discipline growing up, it was not a good connotation. That usually involved consequences. Can you please say more? So I'm going to put this out to both of you. Talk to me about how, with your discipline and just the way that, because I would imagine you both have had time now as coaches, you're experts, to see the horizon of this, to see the younger version of you being disciplined, how it stood out in your life, the way it marks you different, and then how it now, with the term Gallup has used, the raw to mature version of it. Would love to hear the discipline journey from two that relate to it so strongly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'll,
maybe
I'll
I'll
jump in and
start.
go first.
Oh,
I love it. You're supposed to. Yes, talk over each other. It's the best. So
Carolyn, you go.
you guys
okay.
defer and figure this out.
I'll go. Thanks, Leanne. I appreciate that. It's funny that you bring that up because I really have been thinking about this. Like, how did it first show up in my life? And how has it matured? So I think about when I was a kid, I was one of the few kids that actually had a organized room. Like things were put away, they're in their place. It wasn't like my mom had to tell me to clean my room and make my bed. I just did it. So it showed up that way when I was young. And it was probably pretty strange for a lot of my friends. They're probably going, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with all this crazy organization stuff? And then as I got older and I kind of understood it, I really put it to work in my career. So one of my roles and early on in my career was I was an instructional designer, and it helped me create curriculum, content, courses, structure, kind of building learning programs. And it was so helpful for me to help come alongside leaders, organizations to just build that curriculum in a meaningful and helpful way. It does sometimes get in the way. And I know we're going to talk about that later, but it does sometimes get in the way because I love the structure to the point of where, oh gosh, okay, let's take a step back here. But I'll say that for later.
I have so much to say on this because although this is not one of my 34, I mean, technically it's in there, but my daughter, my fourth child, and it's actually the running family joke because we have 7 children, and the only one we planned for and actually like really structured to get pregnant was number 4, and this child comes out with number 1 discipline, and I don't think that's on accident. But as you were describing the clean room and organization, I am flashing back to my child who, if you went in her room and anyone moved anything, she knew it and you were going to hear about it. That was like, do not touch her clothes. Do not mess up her shoe order. Do not anything in its place for decor. So the kids started to learn how to mess with her. they would move things around on purpose to get at her because it always worked. It always worked. And it was so interesting to me to go, wow, how does that work? Now, of course, for school, for sports, for like doing chores, like punctuality, like always, like this is the kid that was keeping us all in check. But interesting that you mentioned the room.
Oh my, okay. So I need to jump in too. So I had a little of that. I think growing up, I knew I was structured and I craved kind of order and routine and those kind of things. But for me, I'm also really high in relationship building. And so it was very like outward for me. in a lot of ways. My favorite story that I often share in workshops, because I love to ask this question in workshops, like, how did this maybe show up when you were a kiddo? I think sometimes people, when they even struggle to see a theme in themselves because they just take it for granted, right when you learn your top 5, you're kind of like, maybe, I don't know. I think sometimes people it's just an on-ramp for some reflection when you ask them about being a kiddo, and they're like, oh yeah. Well, for me, I loved thinking about sort of step-by-step processes and like the whole framework and the system. And so I remember I was in 2nd grade. My mom was a teacher, so in some sense, I kind of came by this honestly, but I remember I decided one day that I wanted to create like a library for my family. And again, this was like what I was doing in my spare time. I was 7 and I was like, okay, I got the books together, and I remember vividly thinking, okay, what do I want the library cards to look like? And I made them. And of course, I'm thinking like, here's the system and the structure. And then people will come in. And then I was like, ooh, I got to organize. How do I want to put the books in my room? Right. And I was kind of organizing by author and like, and so I had a whole system. And then I'm thinking about timelines, like how long is their checkout good? And how are we going to keep track of it? And how am I, as the administrator, going to know all this stuff? So as you probably see where this is going, is that then I created this whole system, took who knows how long, but I was so energized. And then I bring my brother and sister, they're younger than me, my parents in. I'm like, everyone, here's the plan. Here's the library that, by the way, nobody asked for. Like nobody was asking for my library, but that was so fun for me. And it was energizing to think about the whole process, step by step. That was the kind of stuff I really gravitated towards. And even in a sense, I think about, so my background's in higher ed. So Carolyn, when you were talking about instructional design, I've got a ton of experience in that too. And when the rest of the faculty members, I taught at Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas, which is where I'm based. And people would like, oh, we got to make the syllabus and like, we got to do all the semester planning. And I was like, buckle up, my friends. Like I got really excited about that. So I've always been energized in thinking about the whole system and the process and the routine. But it definitely showed up in ways when I was younger where I was like, come on, everybody, get on board, and not so much.
That's so funny. I love that story.
Yeah, I'm over here thinking I have a 7-year-old grandson, and I'm trying to imagine just the ingenuity, the thoughtfulness, the inspiration to create a library.
I know.
With library cards. I'm thinking my grandson he's a smarty, but I just think, wow, the level of intentionality that you had to have of a 7-year-old.
But isn't that the whole point? Is like
it is.
Talent is like, it was like, I wasn't having to sit down and like really like, it was, the steps were so natural. I just knew, oh, I got to think about this. I got to think about this. What about this? And it wasn't work. It was natural for me, and still is. Yeah.
My wife and I wrote a book on strengths-based parenting. And when we did our research, one of the researchers that we really plugged into, her name is Dr. Lee Waters. And she talks about the difference between a core strength and a growth strength, and how core is so deeply embedded. It's written on the source code. So you couldn't unbe this if you wanted to. And it comes out with such a flourishing and such an expression that, as you were saying, it's timeless intention. It's the ability to create just energy, enthusiasm around what it is you're doing. And you can't imagine another way to be. So one, on the one hand, I'm amazed that you were 7. 2, I'm amazed at your recall of your 7-year-old self and how you're describing your 7-year-old self. I'm thinking, wow, Leanne, you have told the story a few times, because
I have.
It's visceral to hear you describe that version of who you are. Very cool. Okay, so what do you think about that, Carolyn? Because you were hearing that too, and I know you had a comment there, and I jumped over it. What were you responding to there? Coaches and service-based business builders want to 10x your impact and income? Join the Strengthspreneur Mastermind, led by Brent O'Bandon, MCC, author of the Strengthspreneur 10x Workbook, and the world's first Gallup-certified strengths coach. This powerhouse group gives you personalized coaching, peer support, and proven tools to launch and scale your unique strengths. We meet 2 times a month. Come sharpen your strategy, boost confidence, and grow smarter, not harder. Visit podcast.34strong.com to thrive as a strengthspreneur. Again, visit podcast.34strong.com. Join Brent O'Bannon and thrive as a strengthspreneur.
I love that comment. It's how I just go through my life. Really, it's funny, we have so much in common. My mom was a teacher and educator. And I always wanted to teach and ended up being in, adult learning, obviously, versus kids. But I loved putting together programs, curriculums. I get so excited when a new project kicks off and I get to put it all in order and structure, and it just brings so much energy and joy to everything that we do. Even though it's number 5 for me, it shows up pretty strongly day to day, just in everything that I do.
Yeah. And Carolyn, I bet you as an instructional designer would think this too, but I always found, because I taught very large college classes. I was the director of public speaking. So I had about 1,500 undergraduate students every semester. And I had about 20 to 30 graduate teaching assistants. And so I had to train and onboard them. I used that discipline quite a bit to help build programs for them. But then with my students, the kind of comments that I would get from them that I think were positive comments would be that they always knew what to expect, that like everything was super clear, organized. And, there's kind of that stereotype of like a professor that's just like brilliant, but just like, it's just so much chaos and they can't keep things. They forget they had class because they were writing a research paper somewhere, And so I think I was able to sort of bring a lot of structure to a class where there's a lot of anxiety for students, in public speaking. And that instructional design brain that you have, that we've got with this discipline thing, I think serves people so well, even when they don't realize that that's our discipline. But it's a gift of like clarity for them and stability and predictability. And so I'm sure you see that all the time.
It's such a good point too, Leanne, because further on in my career, most of my background is in credit unions, and I moved into higher level roles, and just that calmness, that steadiness, keeping things moving forward, especially during tough times like the pandemic. So I was in credit unions when we had the recession. I worked all the way through the pandemic. There was just so much crazy chaos, and just being that calm, steady presence was so helpful to the team. The other thing I'll say is it just gave people hope, right? It gave people like, okay, she knows what she's doing. She's calm. She's steady. She's not flustered. It just gave people hope that, okay, we're going to get through no matter what the hard time was. So it really served me well, even as a leader, even though some people might be like, oh gosh, discipline, what does that mean? Is she going to be so structured that it's not going to be a great place to work? But it actually served me really well, even in higher level leaders roles.
Yeah. Okay. First off, this is creepy because my husband was an executive at a credit union, and also I have a ton of credit union clients. Funny story on that is one time I was talk about poor individualization. That's my number 1. And it was a real fail for me this one day. I was doing a workshop at a credit union, and I said something, and then I was like, and you can take that to the bank. And the CEO in the
Don't
back,
ever say that.
very funny. The CEO in the back he's cool. We're cool. But he goes, we would never take it to the bank. And it just cracked me up. Anyway, so this is wild. But I love what you're saying there, because I also feel like some of the stereotypes that people have about discipline, which I think is fair for us to own, is that we are not always the best unless we've got other strengths to really support change. We can kind of get a little like off the rails about change because we have invested so much in the routine and the structure and predictability. But I think one of the big misconceptions there is, that we're incapable of change. I find that once I get over kind of the initial shock to my system, when things are changing, I'm actually, and I think disciplined people in general are actually pretty good at going, okay, with what we've got, with what we're looking at now, what are the systems, processes, structures we can put in place to get back to, functional, or to get back to chasing our goals. So we actually have, I think, a lot of change agency if we can kind of get over that initial like whiplash, if you will. I don't know if that's been the case for you, but that definitely has been for me. You've got a ranger though, so you probably do that way better and much more naturally than I do.
I do lean on a ranger a lot. So ranger's 4 for me. And that's kind of after I get over the initial shock, like you said, I'm like, okay, I got this. I can arrange things. How can I make this work? I had an example not too long ago. I was working with a client and we were doing a management team planning session, kind of a retreat. It was a day and a half retreat. And literally 3 or 4 days before, my sponsor stakeholder called me and said, well, I have some news for you. 2 of the key players are no longer with the credit union. I was like, okay. So after I got off over the initial shock, we completely rearranged the session within a couple days. But I had the structure from discipline. So I knew what the structure was. I just need to kind of reorganize and reshuffle and get some people in there to jump in, because I had it all outlined in detail. The steps were all there. So it was pretty easy for people to jump in. And that's where a ranger and discipline worked together to get me through that. But yeah, it absolutely, you can pivot after you get over the initial shock. Takes a second, but you do it.
It does take a second.
For both of you, because you have high individualization, and I'm so curious to ask you this, because people with high discipline are noted that their world is described by the order they create. So the world is described by, I have created an order out of chaos. I have come up with the ideal system that has the highest efficiency, effectiveness. Don't worry, I thought of everything. It is the best possible solution for how we should get things done. So hold that in mind as high individualizers. How do you then handle those who do not respect your structure, routine, order, that just defy it, go again, and whether it's intentional or unintentional, but they just don't see you or see what you've done for the effective strategy, the effective ability that you have. So just curious here, because in my experience with high disciplines, I have met, we'll call it a mutual frustration that seems to exist with those who don't get it. I am one of those such people who has experienced that. And so I'm wondering how, because individualizer is unique, right? You see the differences with people and you have the high discipline. So it's interesting that you both are sharing that. Whoever wants to go first, want to hear how you balance those.
That's so true. I'll start. Individualization is super helpful, though. And it's a nice offset, because I do have some relationship building strengths in my top 10 as well. And I would say you mentioned the arc of understanding your strengths, Brandon. And when I was younger, I got a lot of feedback, especially when I first started leading and when I was a supervisor and a manager, and it had to be done my way. That obviously did not work. And I learned pretty quickly through surveys and just direct feedback that people would be like, I'm not going to do it your way. I'm going to do it my way. So over time, I think I just kind of learned that, here's one way you could do it. Here's the way that I might approach it. But I always led and still lead with, 'cause in my coaching today, I do this. How would you approach this? What steps would you take? And if then they're struggling, then I might offer a suggestion, but I kind of give them the first shot, because they could do it in a completely different way. Leanne, what do you think?
Yeah, very similar, but I think, so I have, harmony in my top 5 in addition to individualization. So actually one of my biggest, my favorite things to do with clients is to get in, and sometimes this eats my lunch though, because it's like it really is a tug of war between some of these things, like that I want to individualize, but I also am so disciplined. And for example, like my business coach will always be kind of in a good way, kind of on me about like, I think you're reinventing the wheel too much. Like you need to build a little bit more structure when it comes to the way you serve clients, because I'm very on my business side of things. I have everything is very regimented, structured, and it's efficient, and I move fast and I get things done. But then when I start working with clients, that individualization, which is number 1 for me, gets dialed up so high. And then I think like, wait, we got to totally redo all of this. And so but then I'm like warring with myself about it. Like this bothers me, but this bothers me. And so I do have to be mindful of that as well to kind of find a sweet spot. But I actually think that that's an area where I can bring a lot of value with the individualization is similar to Carolyn, what you're saying about this process of instructional design is like there's a plan and you work the plan, but the course is different and the students are different and the goals of the program are different. And so you get to do really good audience analysis and and work that way. Brandon, to your question, I think about, when there is some tension, even with people, I think my harmony helps a lot there because I'm also very sensitive to the effect that I may have on people, and not that I do that perfectly, of course, but I am very cognizant, I think, of how that discipline might be perceived by other people and even unique people. So I'm very sensitive to that. I sometimes will describe it like discipline it brings a lot of clarity to my relationships with my team or with others, whereas harmony brings a lot of calm and kind of reduces tension. And so I have found that those two kind of work hand in hand. When I think I get out of alignment, I think people might say Leanne gets rigid or stubborn or kind of wants to die on all the hills. That's probably my belief too, but like wants to die on all the hills when I'm stressed or when I'm burned out or when I'm putting too much of my identity in my work, which is a struggle that I have always had as like a high kind of achiever and, person. So when I get kind of dysregulated, I think is when the raw discipline shows up the most.
I was curious about how your belief and discipline worked hand in hand. Because, one would say discipline with all kindness is affectionately known as the stubborn theme.
Yeah.
And then you have discipline with the structure theme. So the stubborn theme with the structure theme, I can imagine at times with the harmonies, you put that harmony to work to soften those edges, I imagine.
I do. But the funny thing about that is like even my family, because we talk strengths all the time, and even to my family, sometimes I will say there will be moments where like my harmony keeps me quiet until almost like the belief is dialed up too much. And then I have to say something or my discipline gets, offended or something. And I got to say something and it'll be like, well, belief won out this time, or discipline won out, beat harmony this go round, So I do have to kind of think about how they all balance together. I don't know, Carolyn, if you're that way, I wonder if you are, because you've got relator so high.
Yeah.
How that is for you with your people.
Yeah. Same thing. So those two, the individualization and relator definitely battle with the discipline, and often the people, the relationship strengths come first. Years ago, that was probably not the case. The discipline was just way stronger and kind of ruled. And over time, I haven't done the assessment multiple times because I feel like that's pretty much right on. So I don't feel like I need to do it multiple times. But I think that if I were to have done it like maybe 15 years ago, it may have been the discipline would have been higher up. And learning over time that the people have to come first and the individualization and the relationships really, that's the foundation. And then once you build that foundation, then you can dive in with some of the structure. Then there's a better receptiveness to it, and people are almost relieved. Oh, okay, good. Someone's coming along and helping with this.
Do you ever feel lonely as a coach or solopreneur? What if you had a place where you could surround yourself with like-minded coaches who truly get you, where learning, sharing, and growing together is the norm? Connect, learn, and share, started by Charlotte Blair, is a vibrant community of Clifton Strengths coaches from around the world. Hosted on the Circle platform, it's a place where you'll find people, processes, and events to help you grow your business, enhance your coaching and facilitation skills, and thrive in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment. Connect with coaches from diverse backgrounds and experiences. Learn through a calendar of recorded events across time zones, and share your knowledge in a community built on an abundance mindset rooted in strengths. Visit podcast.34strong.com to learn more. Again, podcast.34strong.com to learn more about the Connect, Learn, and Share community.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. I love how you just said that. It made me think too about how for me, I think I do that a lot with belief as the foundation. So I think about when I do need to impose some order and structure for example, my team, I think about my students and policies that we had and like the structure and the processes that I was always sort of trying to anchor that in vision or purpose or why. And I would teach my TAs all the time, like if you frame things, say, because I value consistency and because it matters to me that every student taking this class has the same experience, here's kind of some of this order and structure. And so I think that I love how you said that, Karen, like laid a foundation for people to go, oh, we get it. We get it. Not always, of course, but I think that helps.
It helps. It helps for sure. Especially, when you're leading a larger team and they're going, what is she talking about? What's all this structure? Why are we doing all this? Why is this? Why? And so building that relationship and foundation, then they begin to trust and they see, okay, I see this is making sense to me. It helps for sure.
Carolyn, I hear you're a learner because you're definitely describing the path of one that is taking in and applying what you're experiencing. So you're deciding what is good and this is going to work. So I'll go with this and doesn't, because the path of discipline, because it does lean in, as I'm hearing you both, it leans into order and structure because it does eliminate chaos. That's its job. That's what it brings to you. And yet learner, it sounds like, also recognizes you have to contend with the messy because that's who they are. It's what it is. And leadership is not a straight line, ever. It's never a straight line. It's always double backs and around the bends and over a hill because people don't operate that way. They never just march in order. Even the best of us don't do that. And so the reality that I hear that, I'm curious when learner is, because you lead with it, it's driving. I imagine it has helped you adjust your discipline accordingly.
Definitely. I'm glad that you brought up learner because it is, obviously I lead with that. I was working with a client just the other day when we were talking about a metaphor of a labyrinth. So when you go into a labyrinth, you're trying to find your way. You might go one way, you might go another way. You kind of go down a path, you hit the end, you turn around and come back. And and she was describing the frustration of like hitting up against a wall and having to come back and double back. And she doesn't have learner high, but because I coach through strengths as well, but I do. And I say, well, the way a learner thinks about it, it's like, okay, that didn't work. I'm going to come back. I know my way back and I'm just going to try another path. And if that path doesn't work, I'm going to come back and I'm going to try another one until I figure out the way out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I figured it out. I got out of the labyrinth and no problem. And it just made sense to her versus she kept thinking I'm just hitting a wall and then I'm not learning anything from it. And learners really what helped me figure out, okay, when do I use discipline? When do I use a ranger? When do I use my relationship building strengths or some of my other top 10? It's a very helpful strength. I know it's one of the most common ones, but I do really rely on it every day.
Thank you. Where is responsibility for both of you?
It's in the teens somewhere.
You're in the teens, and where's yours, Leanne or Carolyn?
7 for me.
7, yeah, because that's the common pair, right? Discipline with responsibility seems to come in common, but Leanne, with your belief, I see why, because you're so anchored with those two up high. Okay, I've met a lot of discipline with responsibility. That it's a very common pair. I wonder if you two have seen that as well.
I have, and I do see it a lot with achiever, which that's my number 2. And so sometimes those really are the ones together that will like kick me in the tail if I'm not careful. Because they almost just like fuel each other, and that's great. I get a lot done. I've always been really efficient and precise, and I have always sort of been told things like, "Oh, you're like a machine," or like a what? That sounds bad. Not like a robot, but like a well-oiled machine. Like I just build these processes and I just go.
I've heard that. I've heard that for discipline.
Yeah,
I've heard people like they get that like, oh my gosh, you're like you just like repeat. Like you're the highest productive, you're the most efficient. You're like a machine, and they mean it. I every time I've heard it complimentary though.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of how it was phrased to me.
You're like AI, before AI. No kidding.
Well, I feel so for the achiever piece for me is like Carolyn, as you were describing that, like your mindset for learner, I was like, oh, I wish I had a little bit more of that because, achiever for me is, and I also have competition high, is I can sometimes see things as very win or lose. And sometimes that works against me and holds me back, serves as a barrier. But my achiever to me is it's sort of I'll get a dopamine hit, if you will, from the planning itself. Like I love that. But I also then, if I break a big project down into small steps, like I get a dopamine hit from every single one of those. I almost get the same achiever hit, if you will, from like finishing the project as I do like step 3B it's more about that rhythm of needs to be done, needs to be done. That is so energizing for me. So I do have to be careful that I don't run myself into the ground because that is so energizing until it's not,
Yeah, I do agree with you. I have achiever as 8 and, I'll not nearly as strong as you, Leanne, but I have to be careful. I've burnt myself out way too many times because of, just the steps in the process and getting it done. And like you said, Brandon, and Leanne, I think you said it too. You're like a machine. Someone just said that to me the other day. It's like, wow, you just keep producing. And I'm like, I know, I need to slow down. It's too much. It's too much. I need to stop. So I do hear you on the burnout part of it for sure. How do you overcome that, Leanne? What do you do to calm yourself down? Because it's hard, right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, okay. One thing here's something I think has helped me tremendously, but I also believe has helped a lot of the people that I coach who are high discipline and achiever too, is we're kind of naturally, I think, as discipline people, good at time management. We tend to have a pretty good intuition around like how much time things will take. So if, for example, when my kids are like, oh yeah, I can do that in this amount of time, I'm like, no, you cannot. I just have a really good intuition around time. But so I think we're pretty good at time management. What I have had to grow in, and I think is a really good call to someone high in discipline to grow, is like energy management is a big piece of it. So time management, right? Time is this like finite thing, this finite resource. Energy is like, we can replenish that, we can deplete that, And so I think for me, developing over the years and helping other people with discipline, it's like, we have to figure out how to manage our energy well. Just because we can fit it on a calendar doesn't mean we're going to be operating at our best to squeeze everything in. Like I can figure it out. My assistant tells me all the time, I don't know how you get all this stuff done. And there are days where I'm like, I should not have, frankly, done everything I did today because I may have checked it off, but I was not feeling at my best. So energy management for me is a big piece of it. And then the only other thing I'll say to that, Carolyn, is I think over time I have learned how to sort of automate, if you will, some decisions. So I see discipline as almost like meal planning, like the concept of meal planning. It's like make the decisions now, prevent decision fatigue later by creating the system and then just working the system. And that has helped me. Whereas I will build in things that are important for my energy management. About 2 years ago, I had a whole lot, kind of some health issues happening. I wasn't in a great physical place. And I knew I've got to start prioritizing working out. So I have since then 3 times a week. And I'm telling you, like clockwork, because of that discipline, I haven't missed it. Almost unless I'm on vacation or something weird happens, is like I do that every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2:30, right before I pick up my kids from school. And does it cost me a little bit in terms of potential work? It does, but what it affords me is infinitely worth it. So I think that's the other thing, is like automating your good decisions, building systems to kind of set yourself up for not having decision fatigue when it matters most.
Love it.
So I want to say to both of you, this has been a deeply rich and enriching conversation for our guests. And for myself, thank you for the depth of understanding, the wisdom, the insights, the journey that you both have had with this particular strength. I'm wondering, as we're wrapping up, that you would do 2 things for me. One, tell our listeners where they can find you, what you're up to, who you are working with, who you serve. And then 2, just any last bits on if you were to give someone with high discipline, someone working with discipline, like here's my parting discipline piece for them. If you could do that for us. Carolyn, could you go first on that?
Yeah. Well, thanks again for allowing us to talk about this strength that's maybe a little underappreciated, because clearly Leanne and I are super passionate about it. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Carolyn Reeves. I also have a website, carolynreevesconsulting.com. I primarily work with credit unions, as I mentioned. I partner with leaders to help them with engagement, growth and development, coaching. I really just love helping people grow. That's one of my core values. My parting thought is one of the things that is most meaningful to me about discipline is when I left my role at my credit union, one of the leaders said to me, and it just really stuck with me. He said, Carolyn, I can always count on you. And that's how I see discipline, as someone that just can be counted on. You're always going to come through. And it just, that's meant the world to me.
I love that. Okay. Well, also, thanks so much, Brandon. And Carolyn, it was so great to get to know you just a little bit, and we'll have to connect later. Yep. So you can find me. I'm also on LinkedIn. Leanne Lagasse is my name. And then leannelagasse.com. I work with leaders and organizations in several capacities. I am a keynote speaker, trainer. Also, I build leadership development programs for organizations. I'm really passionate about middle managers. I think that they just are the unsung heroes of our organization. So I do a lot of work with them, and executive coaching as well. So would love to just connect with any like-minded friends out there. I think, kind of parting thought about discipline is maybe piggybacking on some of what I just shared about what advice would you have to sort of develop it. I think if you have discipline, it's such a personal strength and a theme in a lot of ways, because it's about productivity and like our internal systems. I think when I see it shine the most with the leaders I work with, it's when you take that internal mindset and you flip it outward and think, how can I serve the people that I work with by bringing structure and predictability and clarity, while also honoring, right, the strengths and the needs that they have as unique people. And so that's what I would just encourage, if you have discipline, or if you're working with somebody with discipline, is to think about where that order and structure could serve you best.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. And to our listeners, you have been given such incredible insights about the discipline strength. You've heard how it connects to other strengths within someone's top 5, just the origin of how it can start very young for those of you that might be thinking, this sounds a lot like me. And if you haven't taken Clifton Strengths, we encourage you to talk to people like Leanne and Carolyn, get your strengths and learn more about them. If this episode resonated with you, please do share with others in your network. We love to spread the word about focusing more on what's right with people than what's wrong with them, and giving them opportunities to learn their unique strengths. As we wrap up our time together, Leanne and Carolyn, thank you again. You both did such a wonderful job, and we're all headed into a weekend here. So when this episode comes out, everyone that has a chance to listen, do understand that our goal this season is to reveal secrets of the strengths and different aspects based on how it interacts with others. So come back for our next episode and hear about another strength and the secrets therein. Have a great time, everybody. Take care.
That's a wrap on this episode of Coach to Coach. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're a strengths coach looking to dive deeper, join the Coach Strong community. It's where coaches like you come together to share insights, support one another, and discover partnership opportunities. Be part of the conversations that are elevating our industry. Email community@34strong.com to join today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on Coach to Coach. Stay strong.